Mountaintop. Here we go. A wonderful play written by Katori Hall. This play was brought to me doing scene study class here at Lee Strasberg. And I was kind of apprehensive, because it's Dr. Martin Luther King. I'm like, yo, I'm not playing that play. Like, this is a little country boy from Florida. Like, I cannot talk like how Dr. King talked, and it was really interesting doing the research and listening to some of his sermons. Dr. King was country, so that made me feel a whole lot better. It made me feel like I do belong and I do have a place, and I can be just as country, just as loud, but I can still be eloquent and I can articulate. But that's one of the things that I took from the play, The Mountaintop, and it's a reimagination of the time when Dr. King was assassinated, right after he gave the Mountaintop sermon in Memphis, Tennessee. And a lot of people don't know that sermon was not only for civil rights, but it was for sanitation workers. So the sanitation workers can get fair wages. And a lot of times we think that Dr. King was just for civil rights, but he was also against poverty. He was also against the war at Vietnam. And that's something I didn't know until I started doing the research. What the play is mainly about was an angel coming to take Dr. King to heaven, letting him know his work here is done. And once you really start reading this and really get into it, Dr. King was 39. That is crazy for him to have accomplished so much to be so young. And that's one of the things the angels were telling him in the play. Like, you've been through a lot. Like, you have the heart of a 60-year-old, And it just really set the tone and set the pace for how this play was going to go. Because during the whole play, Dr. King is struggling with his death, with him knowing that he wasn't going to make it to the mountaintop. He wasn't going to make it to the other side, and all these things he had just preached about. He wasn't going to see any of that, because in the morning when he got up, he was going to be assassinated. And it was so humbling for me as an African American man to see somebody do that with such grace, such class, and just such dignity. But what I learned from reading the play was he struggled too. He had flaws. He had struggles. He had fears. He had loneliness, leaving his family, in a certain part of the play, in the beginning of the play, excuse me. He called his wife and she doesn't answer the phone. And you can only imagine what's going through his head. You're away from your family, doing the civil rights time. Everybody know where your family stays. Everybody know what you're doing. And the one time you call your family, you don't get an answer. Like, when I was reading the play, I was like, damn, I wonder how he really felt. Is my family okay? And is everybody all right? And to not have that answer, it just really drove me down a rabbit hole to do more research and to know that Dr. King did all this broke. I mean, broke, bro. Like, no money. Like, hand to mouth, bro, And what he was willing to sacrifice, not no likes, not no comments, not no brand deals. Like, he sacrificed everything, not for just the betterment of him or the betterment just of black people, but of all people, of all races, colors, creeds, and nationalities. That's inspiring. That's, for me, I just can't read this play and just stay the same. I was watching the Super Bowl this weekend, and they did the Black National Anthem, and she was singing "Lift Every Voice and Sing Till Earth and Heaven Rings," and I was like, just that line right there just speaks so much grace and so much compassion, even for the people who may not have compassion for you, or people who may not respect you fully, but to still lead with grace. And that was one of the main things I took from this play, and to always knowing when the time is right to let go. And at the end of the play, even though he resisted most of the time, and even he had a chance to talk to God in the play, like try to bargain. But once again, God shut that down. God was like, nope, you coming home. And once he finally realized that his job here was done, he surrendered gracefully in the play. And I could just only imagine what that must have been like for him to be like, yeah, I'm done, or not even be like, yeah, I'm done, but just like not call it quits. I can only imagine him coming to the realization his time was up and that his job here was done and that he gonna have to trust other people to carry on his legacy. And the play was written in 2009, which speaks to the time, first black president and all this kind of things going on. So when you do your research and when you are reading plays, check out the time when the play was written, when the playwright wrote the play, because that also speaks a lot to the play and to the theme of the play itself. That's one of the things I did. And at that time, like I say, we getting the first black president when the play was written. And so what was going on in Miss Katori Hall's mind writing that play, writing like, yo, Martin dream is like finally coming true in some ways. And but even in the play and in his sermon, he is still speaking about the job is not done. And sometimes I think we kind of lose sight of that, like once we see the first and we think, oh, that's it and that's enough, but that's not it and that's not enough. The fight, not even the fight must go on, well, the fight must go on, but also, we fight in other ways and it's not always violence. And that's another thing I respect about Dr. King. And that's another thing he talked about in the play. He talks about him and Malcolm and the difference between both of them and how he really believed in nonviolence and how he really thought violence begets violence. And so he was super against that because he said, and which is true, their guns is bigger than ours. They got dogs, water hoses, and what we got, rocks and sticks. So if we keep fighting them, the fighting just go get worse. And he didn't like that. And he seen us as a people, not even us just as black people, us as all people who was with the cause more than just violence and blowing up stuff and stealing. And he was against all that. And also too, what I found interesting, even though we know we had a first black president and during Barack Obama's tenure, we did go to war and we was in quite a few wars. And it would have been interesting if Dr. King was still around and how he would have thought about the first black president, not trying to end wars, but, perpetuating them, because Dr. King was totally against wars. Like he didn't see the purpose in them at all. So going once again, doing my research and going down that rabbit hole, I was like, I wonder what Dr. King would have thought. So I said all that to say read the play. And it's a good play. It's a great play. If you're looking for a nice two-hander, here you go. It can't get no better than the Mountaintop by Katori Hall. A so to wrap it up, what I can say is I learned about all the facets of Dr. King. Not all of them, but I learned what I was dealing with as through the character work, through reading the play, and then doing the research, how even though Dr. King had so many great gifts and so many wonderful talents and did so many great things, but he still was a complicated human being, still a flawed human being. And tend to think we forget that we're all human. And doing research again, here we go, going back to Dr. King, he understood, people are people. And, hurt people usually. And when people feel like they're being wrong, they tend to lash out, even though if they lashing out against the wrong people, because just like he was saying, we just as much Americans as the next person, and beating us down ain't gonna make you more American. Pulling us down and trying to oppress us is not gonna make you more American, make us less American. And once we start to realize that not just white people, but black people too. Once we start realizing that we are part of this fabric just as much as anybody else, and we have ownership too, I think it'll create a different kind of pride in who we are as a people, and what we can do and what we can accomplish. And that's another thing I learned about taking chances, and not being scared. And what is fear? What is somebody saying you can't do something, or somebody saying you don't deserve something, or somebody saying you not right for something? Reading this play really helped me cement who I am as an artist, and I do belong, and I do have a voice, and I do have gifts, and I do have talents. And I do have flaws, because sometimes I want to cut somebody out. Sometimes I want to slap somebody. And I understand. I learned that, like, reading that play and doing the research on Dr. King, you can still have all those complicated things and issues, but you don't have to act out on them. And another thing that really tied me to Dr. King is his spirituality. Now, everybody knows I love Jesus. So, but to hear Dr. King talk about Jesus all the time, I'm like, he gets me, dog. Like, he really gets me. And that's, I think when I was doing my character work, and that's the first thing I jumped into. And that's one of the main things that made it easier for me to embody Dr. King, was he had such a strong faith, and he wasn't shy about it. And I do too. Like, I have a strong faith, and I try to, I don't go beat the drum, but if you ask me, I'm telling you. You know what I'm saying? So, and he made me read, like I say, going back and listening to his speeches really made me own my faith. I don't have to be disrespectful. I don't have to put nobody else's faith down, or, pound my chest and do X, Y, and Z. But I can live a life of the faith I believe in and what I stand for. And that's exactly what Dr. King did. And once I started doing that, it was easier for me to relate to him. And I always try to do that when I'm doing character work. Like, how do I relate to this person, and what is my understanding of what this person is going through that I may be going through, or that I find something similar. And on the surface, it's easy to say, I'm a black man, Dr. King's a black man. I'm from the South, Dr. King is from the South, and I tried all those ways, but it was just coming up so superficial. It was coming up surface. When I was when I was doing the work in rehearsal, it just wasn't feeling right. It wasn't feeling authentic. And I really sat down, and just like I say, I put on the headphones and I went for a walk, and I was just listening to the sermon. I was like, duh, like, Jesus. I was like, that's it. I ain't gonna say, like, but that was like one of the sounding bells that I'm like, oh, okay, this is my way in. This is how, you know, me and Dr. King relate to each other on that kind of level, on that kind of personal, spiritual level, not just superficial, color, regional parts of where we're from, but what we believe in to our core, what we willing to die for and die about. And that's Dr. King. So I like, hey, and it just made me be proud of what I believe in, and be proud of my values, and knowing that I can come to and go into certain places, and still carry my faith. And also, I don't have to be perfect, and once again, doing the research and seeing how Dr. King, he had his flaws. I was looking at an interview with him and Harry Belafonte, and to hear him talk about Dr. King, and I didn't even know they was that close. Him, Harry Belafonte, and Sidney Poitier, they was like thick as thieves. And I was going back to, like I was saying earlier, when Dr. King was broke, like they literally took care of him, and they literally like sent money to his family and gave, paid for them to have security when Dr. King was away. And when Dr. King went to New York, he stayed with Harry Belafonte. I was like, what the? I didn't even know Harry Belafonte was that big in the civil rights movement, let alone like he was locking step with Dr. King. And once again, opening up the history books and going down that rabbit hole, you have Marlon Brando, James Dean, all them. Uh, oh come on, Paul Newman. You're my boy, Paul Newman. Like, yo, they was so big in the civil rights movement. And you, like I say, we not taught that in school. That's another thing why this channel is created, to open your eyes and see like life is bigger than just what they put in books and give to us. But once we set out to explore other books, then that's when the possibilities get big, and that's when our reality and our imagination can stretch, and we can alter our reality. We can change things when we know things ain't right, when we have the knowledge. That's another reason why this channel was created. So I said all that to say, to wrap it up, Miss Katori Hall. Yo, I was house sitting and I was watching TV, and I was just laying out there, and I seen Katori Hall come at the bottom of the screen. I'm like, Katori Hall? Hold on. And I'm watching P Valley, on Showtime. So I was like, Katori Hall. So me, went to Google.com, and it was like, what? I was like, yo. And it's, once again, her work is so progressive and so wide, to be telling a story like the Mountaintop, and to be a creative show like P Valley, where you have a down low rapper in Memphis, Tennessee, hiding his true identity, in order to live this one way of life. So hey, go check out some of her work, man. She's amazing. And I like to say, yo, hit the like button, share, and subscribe. And come back to the house of Asher, the house of storytelling. Hey.